Hello, my friend. This is Julie Reisler. I'm your host of the You-est podcast, and I am so happy you're here. Honored to be with you and your journey. Do you struggle with some of those heavier emotions like grief, sadness, anger, anything in that realm? If so, you are going to have some amazing tools and insights after listening to this conversation. I'm recording this after talking to Kris, who you're going to fall in love with. And if you are finding yourself in that space of just feeling like you're constantly on the go, hustling, not having time to really tune into yourself, to be with your emotions and feelings. Or maybe you're like me and you really weren't raised or taught how to handle or to be with those kinds of feelings, the ones that are not as much fun sometimes to feel, but so necessary and part of life. This episode is for you. We are going to get really deep into how to live and be your You-est you from a holistic, integrative lens. You are going to love this conversation. It was so deep, so rich. I'm going to be bringing Kris back because it was that good. So let me tell you really quickly, Kris Carr, if you haven't heard of her yet, she is amazing. Kris is a New York Times bestselling author and a 20-year cancer thriver. She's been called a force of nature by O Magazine and was named a new role model by the New York Times. Kris is also a member of Oprah's SuperSoul 100, recognizing the most influential thought leaders today. Her work has also been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Glamour, Good Morning America, The Today Show, SuperSoul Sunday, OWN, and The Oprah Winfrey Show. Kris's newest book, I Am Not A Mourning Person, which we talked all about, is one that will help you navigate life's biggest challenges and what you can do to handle those tsunami of grief and sadness. Kris teaches people how to take back their health and live like they mean it. We got all into that and how to do that. Her work will change the way you live, love, and eat. And this is true. So thank you for being here. I'm going to let you come right into the conversation. I'm so honored to be here. Please let me know if you have comments, thoughts, feedback, questions. I will be bringing Kris back. You know where to find me on YouTube. We've got an amazing community there. I can actually answer your questions there. Go check us out there, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast, or find me on Instagram at Julie Reisler or on my website, juliereisler.com. And as always, here's to being and loving your You-est you. All right, You-est you, soul family. You are in for such a treat today. I want you to know my guest. I have been thinking that we are dear friends for years. We're actually meeting in person for the first time today. Kris Carr is just a sweetheart and brilliant and wise and real and has so much goodness to share. Kris, I am so excited. I've literally wanted to have a conversation with you. I think since you had that picture of you in a truck that showed you as like crazy sexy Kris, and I'm like, who is this badass chick? I want to know her. With like a smoothie. I was like, yep, that's my girl.
Julie, I just actually stumbled upon that picture recently. I was like, this is a good one. Do I still look the same? Could I still use this?
You
So
could
good to see
so
you.
You could still use it. Thank you. And I'm just really excited. I feel like I know our listeners, my listeners and beyond are just really going to love you and vibe with you. And if they don't already know you, I'm sure many do. There's so much to you and your journey that I'm so excited to share. So thank you, because I appreciate you and being here and sharing from your wisdom and your heart. It makes a
Mm,
difference.
I'm happy to be here.
So I think before we get into your newest book, I Am Not a Mourning Person, which, by the way, for those who are listening, this will be all in the show notes on YouTube. Mourning is spelled not the way you think it is. It is, and we'll get into the twist and what that means. I think for those who maybe don't know you as well, maybe just to start a little bit to level set your journey, your health and well-being and even dare I say spiritual journey. How did you get into what you're doing today? I know it's a big question, so I'll let you pull it from whatever thread is kind of speaking to you.
Well, I stumbled into wellness, and I call myself the CEO of my well-being. I stumbled into this path and this career and to this, mission because I was diagnosed with an incurable stage 4 cancer 21 years ago, and I've been living with cancer for 21 years. And I mean, anybody out there listening, I think that sometimes we come to a healthier way of living because we've had either what I call a warning sign or a wake up call. And I came here through a wake up call, and it completely radically changed my life. It opened me up to a different way of living because living with an incurable disease, what I definitely wanted to do was figure out how I could become an empowered participant in my own well being. Because oftentimes we patients, we go from doctor visit to doctor visit. And for me, in the beginning, there were doctor visits every 2 months, checking in to see how aggressive my disease was. And then you're kind of waiting in limbo. And I thought, well, what can I do in between? What can I do to meet my body and my doctors halfway? How can I start to learn how to take care of myself? And unfortunately, we don't come here with an owner's manual. And I was clueless. I mean, I was starting from a very different place than where I am now. But I kind of threw all of my desperation into the inspiration of learning how to take care of me. And then I realized, wow, there's so much that we can do to feel better, no matter who we are, no matter what we have access to, no matter what our state of well-being. On paper, I was really sick. And yet, as I was starting to take better care of myself, I started to feel a level of vitality that I had never experienced before. And that's what inspired me to start writing and sharing what I was learning, because I figured I'm probably not alone. At the time, I was 31 and 52 now. And maybe some other people could use this information as well. So that's how it started.
Okay, so I have chills. And I just want to say, anyone listening, go watch this on YouTube as well. First, you do not. And I'm not into the whole like anti-aging, but you really, like, your vitality, your light is so bright. There's no way you're 52. I'm sorry. I heard everything you said. And for those of us who are like on the cusp of 50, I'm like, no, there's no way. So I want to pull this apart a little bit, because when most people get a diagnosis like that, it almost feels like an oxymoron, Kris, to say, you were diagnosed with this stage 4, and then to be 21 years or 22 years later looking more healthy and vital. Like, how did you get your mind around that? Like, maybe we can just go into, I know you've done so much around nutrition and food and what you eat and well-being. I have friends. You've got so many friends you don't even know about that are sharing the books to get. I have your recipes. And it's just always had me in the space of, how is she doing that? And what is that like? And I know those are a lot of questions. So I'll just say, maybe we start with, how did you, for those who have other kinds of conditions or illnesses, how did you do the inner work first to shift your mindset, the wake up call? Like, what was that
Yeah.
like? What did you do?
Well, I needed some place to put my focus. And in the beginning, I think it was a distraction from my pain and from my grief and from my anxiety. It was like, I've always been somebody who likes a job, and I really like a creative job. I mean, that's like music to my ears. I'm happy as a little clam, right? And so I thought, well, here's how I can spend my time, because I do want to be alive. I do want to contribute to my well-being, as I said. And I have a very slow growing, currently stable, rare sarcoma. And the thing about my disease is sometimes it can be slow growing, and sometimes it can be aggressive, and sometimes it can change, which is why I still get tracked. So with that in mind, I leaned on the one thing I always go to, which is curiosity. Whenever I'm lost, I go to curiosity and creativity, and the curiosity to figure out, okay, I don't know anything about my lungs and my liver, and that's where all the tumors are. What if I just got a little curious and tried to understand what those organs like and don't like, and how I can start to tend to them? I can at least start there. And from that place, I was like, well, actually, where I struggle the most with is with my gut health. And I never feel good. What if I put some energy there? And as I was learning more, I'm like, wow, my immune system, my gut, it's all connected. I knew none of that. And so just to make it simple, I needed something to do that wasn't around fear, anxiety, checking out, numbing out, which I could have easily done with alcohol, drugs, all the types of things that we turn to when we're scared, that we turn to for a reason. They're solutions to our pain, even though they're really not, right? And so that was the approach I took. And like I said, I started to feel better. And then I just kept following the crumbs.
Okay. So I'm just going to say this, like your approach, it's miraculous. It's so inspiring. And I want to say this for anyone listening. And I know there's so much more we have to talk about this. Your way of looking at this from the lens of curiosity and creativity, it's brilliant. It's actually, for many people who listen, I coach and a lot of people coach here. And that is one of the cornerstones is getting curious. And you basically did that with yourself and created a new lens. Like, I love that. Like, what would my liver and lungs love? How do I get curious? You got into a different energy and vibration. You looked at gut. I mean, you're so also you were ahead of your time because now it's starting to catch up, obviously. This is why when I was, doing a degree in the health and wellness industry, I found you and I was like, people don't know this. They don't know this. So tell us, I'd love to hear a little more about your getting curious and creative to the point that started to shift how you were eating, taking care of yourself, and the discoveries you've had within yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I left the doctor, and after the first doctor suggested a triple organ transplant, the next one gave me 10 years to live. The next one, radical treatments that wouldn't do anything. So why bother? And then I realized okay, I have to learn how to become my own patient navigator because these people are crazy. I'm sorry. I don't know much about medicine, but this is a bunch of crap. And so I was like, all right, if I was starting a business, I would be hiring and firing and putting together my A team. And that's what I got to do here. And I started, with conventional medicine and finally found my oncologist. And he's great. He's still my doctor. He's wonderful. We have a 21-year relationship now. And he suggested this watch and wait, let cancer make the first move, don't do anything. And he said to me, while you're watching and waiting, I want you to watch and live. I was like, I don't know how to do that, Dr. D. Well, he's like, well, get busy figuring it out. And I left the hospital and I went straight to Whole Foods, and I'd never stepped in a Whole Foods store. And I was terrified more so of the vegetable aisle than I even was of Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. I was like, I don't want to eat any of this stuff. What is this stuff? I don't know how to use this stuff, but I think vegetables are good. And I put them in the cart, and then I literally just started buying cookbooks. And slowly but surely, as you do your research, you figure out how to make this way of living amazing and delicious and miraculous. And also you figure out who the voices are and who the teachers are and who are the people you think really have the cred that you want to learn from. And then I just pieced it together for myself. And really that's how it started.
It's amazing. That really, I want to go back for a minute. And it's important what you said. I know just on my end, not the same thing at all, having a thyroid condition, autoimmune condition. I also did this, firing most of the practitioners. I'm like, if you tell me it's not possible to not have this anymore and for my for the antibodies to go down, you're fired. I know that's not true. And I think what you said is very important, Kris. And this is because I know a lot of listeners that do have various health conditions right now. And taking that into your own hands, it's what you said earlier, being the CEO of your own well-being. Like literally, I'm hearing it's like you created your own business of you, you did. And this is one of the most empowering things. I just want to reiterate for anyone listening who is struggling to just tune in, because you have, you've gone against whatever those odds were, and you changed your timeline and your narrative completely, because you said that's not the way we're going to go. I'm even going to go to Whole Foods and take some vegetables and don't even know what I'm doing with them. And then it's so funny to hear that, because I'm like, I've seen so many and gone through your cookbooks and your books, and I can't even tell you how many. I mean, I've been inspired by so much of what you share. And I just thought, oh, she must have like been raised at a farm and probably was fed like delicious asparagus and Brussels sprouts. I bet she was fed like, thing, like everything right from the farm behind her. I had this whole like idea of you.
Oh, no, 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 no. My idea of a fine meal was like definitely Burger King, and I would cap it off with my Marlboro Lights. So it was a very different lifestyle. I gotta tell you that.
That's not the farm. I had a whole thing with a truck. I was like, oh, girl grew up in a farm. No wonder she knows. And it's helpful to hear that. So you did not grow up with a farm in your backyard, or
No, no, I did not. And I
yeah.
think that in some ways it's so few of us do. And so if I can inspire anybody, it's that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do anything 100%. It's just about saying today's the day I'm going to start making different choices. And one of the things that I like to teach my community, especially when they're just starting and this feels scary, like it did to me 21 years ago, it felt really scary, is to add before you subtract, like add something healthy in before you start to strip things out. I stripped everything out because I was terrified. Right. And the first paths that I took were like, I was macrobiotic for a while, and then I was raw foodist for a while. And over time I created what I call my 5 pillars of wellness. And I created my own practice that's really based on lifestyle medicine, which has been around for hundreds of years. It's the wisdom of our grandparents, really, and our great grandparents. And so that idea to just start to add some goodness into your life today, because eventually it starts to crowd out what doesn't serve you, right? The more I drink water, the less room I have for soda. It's that simple.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the quote. I think it's Michael Pollan. It's like, pay the grocer or pay the physician, pay. It's like just in starting with, that's really so brilliant and so fantastic mindset wise, like add it in, don't worry about subtracting. Because I think for many of us now, I don't know if you've dealt with this. I know for me in my own journey, having had food addiction issues, it could have felt very restrictive, taking out inflammatory foods, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm taking all this stuff out. This feels like I don't personally do diet or diet culture. For me, that doesn't work. Maybe you can talk about that. I know for me, I've redefined it, but I'm curious, because that's a whole other thing, right? When you've got issues around food or sugar, which I frankly believe a lot of times that sugar can lead to issues. But the emotional, crutch, like I used to really rely on food. It's what helped me to feel good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing with me. And at times in my wellness journey, I would say I would kind of relapse back to those places. But whenever I did, I realized that there was something so much bigger going on besides the food, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes I talk about how the first part of my career, I was focused on what you're eating. And now, right now, at this time in my career, I'm really interested in what's eating you.
Mm, mm.
Because the combination of the two, when we get curious about them, that makes up the holistic lifestyle plan that each and every one of us need, but it's also unique to each and every one of us.
That is a drop the mic question that you just said. I was like, okay, what are you eating? Fine. What's eating you? There you go. That we could go into that for hours. We could. I love that. I want to come back to that and your 5 pillars of wellness. I do want to talk about your beautiful, powerful new book, I Am Not a Mourning Person, and to share the title and the spelling of mourning, because it maybe you're not also a actual morning person, but I know there's a
I
different
am
meaning.
actually. I am such an early birdie.
You are an early. Oh, good for you. Wow, that is like I'm praying someday that happens for me. So that's awesome. I'll live vicariously through you. If you could share, just for those that are, may not know of your book yet or what it's about, we could just talk about, like, how did you decide to write? I know you've written other books and cookbooks. Why this book? Why now?
So this book is really addressing the what's eating you. And it had been a bit of a stretch since I'd written my last book. So this is my seventh book. And I was feeling like, okay, it's time to write another book. It had been a bunch of years. And even my publishers were like, hello, where's another book from you? And at the time I'm thinking about what I should write and what would be appropriate now. And I was already wanting to move more into personal development. My last two books were cookbooks. The book before that was a book on plant-based living and crazy sexy diet, which is, the core foundation of an anti-inflammatory plant-based diet. So a lot of work around food. Several of my books are for cancer patients. And so I thought, I should write more of a personal development book, taking so many of the principles that I teach and making it more universal so that people who aren't interested in plant-based living or aren't cancer patients actually read this book. And so that was the idea. But of course, your heart tells you something else. Your mind is like, this is what I should do. And my heart was like, girl, you ain't writing that. You are a mess. We're living through a global pandemic. I was approaching my 20-year cancerversary. This was probably my 18th year at the time, but it was coming. And my chosen father, I was adopted, was dying of pancreatic cancer. And my business was struggling because I had made some choices to step back and I hadn't life-proofed my business. Like if I wasn't doing, we weren't as prosperous and the bills still needed to be paid. And so I was like, I was on this treadmill and I was exhausted. And truthfully, I was falling apart on the inside. And I didn't understand at the time how much grief I was experiencing, anticipatory grief, just the trauma and the grief of being diagnosed at the time, not 21 years ago, but 21 years ago, that was coming up for me as a result of the collective grieving that we were going through, but also what I was experiencing with this impending huge loss that was coming. It was the only thing that I wanted to write about because it was so visceral and so present for me. And I thought, as somebody who's been in the wellness world for 2 decades, I thought I had so much handled. I thought so many of the tools and the principles that I use on a daily basis to reduce stress and inflammation and whatnot, like, I got this. I so did not have this. And so I didn't consider myself a morning person because it was the last thing I wanted to experience, was the one emotion that I would do anything to run from. And yet grief, as I say in the book, it isn't a solo flyer, right? It rolls with a whole bunch of other big, messy emotions that happen when the rug has been pulled out from under you. And yet few of us have the tools to survive storms of that magnitude, but each and every one of us are going to have our teeth kicked in at one time or another. It's going to happen, right? We can't have the rainbow, but say, hold the rain. And when those things happen, when the diagnosis happens, when the miscarriage happens, when the divorce happens, when you lose your job, when you lose your former sense of self, how are you going to pick up the pieces in a way that helps you grow, that helps you thrive, and that helps you come home to yourself? And that's what this book is all about.
Oh, my gosh. I'm like, I've got chills as you're talking. Like, I have been through, let's see, 7 of those 10 things you said. Isn't that interesting? Where were you 12 years ago, my dear friend? Like, where was this book? That is.
Yeah, I was burying it. I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very brave, that even just when you even say the word grief, I don't know the actual cement. For some reason, that word, I don't know, it just even feels like a rain cloud that's heavy. It feels heavy. It feels full, and I just really resonate with you. It's like, who the hell wants to feel that and go through that? And what you're saying, the ability to really, I just keep thinking of those, trees that grow when they have the storm, right? Their roots go deeper, they grow more nimble, they stronger. And I think grief is really, that storm that we all will go through.
It is. And it's so interesting because I'm with you. And I know that a lot of people don't want to talk about this topic. And even my publishers were like, you want to write a book about grief? Can you please write a book about something else? That grief doesn't sell. Even the best grief writers don't sell enough books. And I was like, okay. Well, I handled vegetables and cancer, so I guess I'm going to have to tackle grief too,
Yeah.
because apparently I like difficult topics.
You did not choose the easy route.
No,
No.
no. But, writing the book is one thing, and then promoting the book is something else. And then you learn so much more about the book when you're promoting it, and you learn so much more about people when they start to read it. And I feel like it's just that giving yourself permission to dip in and go on this journey, because so many of us we want to run to the next manifesting book. I do, it's fun. It's yummy. It's delicious. I want to build the life of my dreams. 100%. What if I told you that this was more powerful than any book on manifest? Not my book necessarily, this topic. This topic, if you're interested in personal growth, if you're interested in expansion, if you're interested in fully alive living, and, really feeling comfortable in your skin and excited about your life, I'm sorry, but this is the work that we need to do. And it fast tracks the growth that so many of us crave. And the only thing that's needed is the bravery to just give it a try. And then you start to see how your life will begin to change in ways that maybe you were always hoping it would, but you didn't understand what the block was. And when I talk about grief, I'm also talking about fear, anxiety, shame. It's the big stuff that I believe is like the barrier to fully alive living. Let's knock it out. You know what I mean? Because we can't amputate any of our emotions and expect to be whole.
Oh, that's a great line. Yeah, that needs to be a meme. If it's not, maybe you already have that. That is so beautiful, well said. And it also reminds me, and I know we sometimes get a little spiritual here, a little like deeper here, and living in a world of polarities, of different energies. Of, you just said it. You can't have a rainbow without some rain. So it's hard to appreciate the manifestation and the joy. There's all of it. I keep seeing it's like the underbelly of having that life that you love. There's got to be, otherwise it would be kind of empty, even though I know many of us are like, I'll take empty, but really we wouldn't. I mean, I've had these conversations with myself. I'm like, I'll take empty. But I think what you're pointing to, Kris, is a fullness and a richness that happens when you are brave enough, courageous enough to go into these deeper emotions. What did that look like for you? I guess from the point, and I also want to just acknowledge something you said about following your heart. Like, you were told this may not be the best topic to address, or that it may not sell, and it didn't seem logical, because we talk a lot about intuition and following your heart and your heart intelligence here. And I think that is one thing I've always felt with you, and I just love about you. And I think that that's also why this is so powerful, is this came from a deeper place. It came from a place of, I want to almost move through this with others, so that we have a roadmap, because honestly, there's not a lot of training ground for how to deal with grief. Not that I know of.
Yeah. And yet when you start to dig, and I did an enormous amount of research in writing this book, but also in going for my own healing. And you realize, wow, there are more people talking about this and wonderful experts to follow. But prior to this experience, I wouldn't have wanted to. I was just like, ew, no, that's not sexy. And yet it was exactly what I needed. So I think the first step, honestly, is to start with awareness and going back to curiosity, which is so great for coaching, as you said. If I could apply the same philosophy of, oh, let me get curious about what my liver and lungs like, to, oh, let me get curious about my emotions. What are they? First and foremost, my emotions are energy. And the energy has to go somewhere. And it can go inward, and I can implode or explode. And I know how messy both of those are. I've done both. I probably will do them again. It's not fun, right? So energy has to move. It has to go somewhere. That's why when we are pushing it down and suffocating ourselves and hustling harder and throwing ourselves into, anything that we can get our hands on to numb us, we are pushing down that energy. We're thwarting that energy, right? And so if our emotions are energy, we know they have to move. How do we do that? We can talk about. And then the second thing is our emotions are information. Just like I learned a lot of information from the various body parts. If I can learn the information from my various emotions, then I can understand how to tend to them. And then it becomes less scary and a little bit more practical, quite honestly, so that you don't get, or if I speak for myself, so that I don't get so caught up in the why and caught up in what's wrong with me and whatnot. I'm just like, oh, let's just be clinical about this, and I'm not a psychologist, but I can apply similar principles.
Yeah. You said this so beautifully. I'd love to. And I'm so sorry about your father, your adopted father. I remember watching, and I really I get your email. I listen, I kind of know what's going on. I'm not really there, but I remember when you shared about that. And I'm wondering if you're comfortable walking us through what you share in this book, how did you use these tools around your own grief, around his getting ill and then passing? How have you used maybe the tools or the ways that you've moved through these emotions? I think this is it's so helpful to hear the actual, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So each chapter in the book is set up to address a certain experience or feeling that you may have when the rug gets pulled out from under you. And I start with the initial story of my dad being diagnosed. But I use story throughout the book because I think stories connect us. Stories show us that we're more similar than different, and that no matter where we come from, we have that universal thread of humanity that runs through us all. And so there's various stories that come up through this exploration of from his diagnosis through his passing. And so the second chapter is called Rupture. And that's the thing that's going to happen to every single one of us. That is the moment where everything changes. And oftentimes when we're going through rupture, we might get caught up in asking certain questions. And what I pose in this book, in this chapter, is really to ask different questions to sort of initiate the journey, right? Which is, instead of asking, why did this happen? Because sometimes we will never know the answer. And sometimes we might, but the point is not to get caught up in the why. Can we ask, what can I do now to support myself, right? Because there's so many rich answers that will come from that question. And again, it starts you on the journey. And when I started on the journey, what I didn't understand, which I mentioned earlier, is that it's when the grief train pulls into the station, as my therapist told me, it brings all the cars, right? It brings the stuff you thought you were over. It brings the other big emotions that roll with the grief. And so it can feel like this tsunami, this tidal wave that's going to take you over. And so, of course, we try to push it away, but we're not strong enough to push away tidal waves. And actually, what's needed is to move through it and to allow those waves to come in and out and in and out. And the waves brought things like fear, anxiety, and anger, enormous amounts of rage, which I talk about in one of the chapters. And again, approaching these emotions in a very, I'm curious about you way. I'm curious about you, anxiety. Let me understand you more. I'm curious about you, fear. Let me understand you more. Oh, anger. What are you all about? Why are you here in the first place? What's your purpose? Teach me. Anger is a signaling emotion, right? It basically points to something much deeper under the surface. It also is there to protect us and keep us safe. There's a reason why we go into fight, flight, freeze, especially the fight part. That's literally when we're raging during a grief moment, that literally is us fighting for our lives, And so learning how to tend to each of these, but to answer your question, because, I cover a lot of stuff in the book, is many of us don't have the language to even articulate what emotions we're feeling. We just know we're out of sorts. We just know we're struggling. We just know we're unhappy, right? And sometimes when we don't have those words, right, it's like the little us who didn't have the words to say what they were feeling because we weren't developed enough to understand what we were feeling when we were growing up in the midst of chaos or trauma or whatever it is that each and every one of us hold in our bodies, hold in our hearts, hold in our tissues, right? We didn't have the words. And sometimes as adults, we may still not understand what the words are, what we're feeling. And so first and foremost, I like to say there's an exercise that I teach in the book. It's about calling conditions and saying, if you started somewhere, just start with, how am I feeling? How am I feeling? How can I articulate it to myself? What is it? Write about it, talk about it, go for a walk about it, just to even get familiar with it enough to begin there.
I know this conversation is for many, many, many people. I literally just had this moment, like I forgot, and I'm like, I literally feel like this is you and me and just for me. I thank you.
We hope more people will enjoy it.
Of course, I mean, this is for many, many, and I know anyone listening, especially I have this theory, Kris, especially for those that are highly sensitive, that are empathic, that are already very, heart led. I think, as you were talking about the wave, it was a really great visual. Like, we can't actually hold back the tsunami, the wave. I know, and I would imagine you've felt this, and I know for me, and I know for others that have literally written in about these topics, it's like, it could feel like the emotion of sadness, grief, of loss, of anger. It could feel like it's going to take you over. It could feel like, I know for me, I've had in the past where I just, literally on the floor sobbing. And I felt like, oh my gosh, am I going to die from this? Like, could I die from crying? And I think under that can be a little bit of that fear. I love, though, what you're saying. I really, and I believe this to the core, is when even in those moments you get curious and you even just go to, okay, how am I feeling? What I'm hearing also is, how can I love myself in this moment with this feeling? I'm hearing that under what you're saying, and it's so healing. I mean, I'm one of those people. I used, my addiction was using sugar. Just didn't want to feel this stuff. I really didn't. And I found in my short time taking that away that it actually, there's like an alchemy that happens when you allow it. And I know that's what you're talking about. So that rupture, it's funny. At first I thought you said rapture, and I'm like, maybe that comes later. The rapture.
That would be nice.
Yeah. I'm like, when's the rapture? But the rapture, there's my brain is like, when do we get to the rainbow, please? But that's okay. It's
Well,
part
I
of it.
think that this work leads us there, quite
That's right.
honestly.
That's right.
I towards the end of the book, after my dad has passed, I write about the both and how we can live in this space where it can be magnificent and it can be brutal. It can be that you're fully alive and your heart is broken. And it's that both and that I think is more true to a three-dimensional life. But humans, we don't like the magnificent gray. And unfortunately, you can't have one without the other. Like, if you want love, and we all want love, we want to be loved, we want to love ourselves. Self-love is such a huge part of our healing and what's necessary. if we crave love, we can't have love and not have grief because they're two sides of the same coin. And the more you love, the more you're going to grieve, the more we're going to lose. Right. And so if we can learn to be a little bit more, lately I've been thinking about this and writing about, and I haven't shared it yet, but just writing about it for myself. How can we as human beings become more stress hardy? You know, because it is stressful. It's terribly, devastatingly stressful to lose. And yet, through that stress hardiness, we develop a fortitude, an inner strength through our, in that inner strength comes, quite honestly, through the bravery of softness. Me being more willing to be vulnerable. What's the worst thing that's going to happen if I cry? I think sometimes it's the fear of crying that's worse than the crying. Because when I cry, a really good cry, it's messy and I feel better afterwards. And so if I feel a little bit better afterwards, isn't that the point? Why am I denying myself this feeling because tears are inappropriate or tears will bring shame or I should be stronger or better than that? No, tears are designed for a reason. I'm being ridiculous. Cry.
Yeah. Permission. It, even just thinking nature, we have tear ducts. Like, why would we not have? I mean, we have them. They're there for a reason. I love this magnificent gray. It's funny. My brain went to, we have 50 shades of gray. I mean, gray can be, can be not to go in that direction, but I mean, no, 50. I mean, Maggie, okay. But that magnificent gray, that's really, I'm almost seeing, it's funny that I'm visual and I'm seeing the rainbow bridge is really, you got to have both. The bridge is from one to the other and back. So what I'm also hearing, what I've experienced as well, is the more that you allow yourself to go deep into the grief, the more you can have that depth of love. It's like the depth goes as far as you're willing to go in both aspects of it. And that's just this really powerful. I don't know. I know for many of us, like when I grew up, I'm a similar vintage as you. It's just like it wasn't taught. I mean, I was taught have all your emotions, but it really didn't feel so safe to cry a lot. I think being an older sister and having some traumatic experiences in my family with my dad, PTSD, he was in Vietnam and financial, it was just a mess. Even though it looked great on the outside, it didn't feel that way. I think I developed this like, no, 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 you've got to know, like, keep it together. You are the glue here. Hello. Like, that's what my, little girl, the fear voice said. And learning to just unravel that. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say as well. Like, just let that go and be with sobbing. Um, I don't know. It's taken me a while to be able to do that, Kris. And I would say for anyone listening, like for some of us, some might be like, I cry all the time. I know for me, it took something. I think bravery is the right word. I really do.
Hey, I'm with you. And I think though, really, if we just take a step back, what we're talking about here is going back to that idea if we can't amputate any of our emotions and expect to be whole. And wholeness is what we're all craving. We have a very limited time here, and many of us have more years behind us than in front of us. And so the question is, how do you want to use the remainder of your time? How do you want to feel? Right? Not even just what do you want to do. Of course, I want to do fun things. I want to go to the Galapagos. I want to see what a blue-footed booby looks like. I love birds. I got to see that bird before I go. You know what I mean? And hopefully I have a very long life and I have time to get my ass to the Galapagos. However, it's not just about what I want to do. It's about how do I want to feel every single day while I'm in this body. And I think that one of the greatest experiences we could ever have is the experience of enjoying our own company. When you enjoy your own company, you're full. You are living fully. And the work that we're talking about is a unraveling, it's a peeling back of the layers that keep us from that enjoyment of our own company.
I feel like I'm having multiple goosebump moments where I'm like, Oh my gosh, you are literally speaking the language that we all need to hear right now, and it just resonates so deeply. As you're saying this, how do you want to feel? Giving yourself this time. You mentioned this earlier, and I want to make the connection. You talked about your business and realizing that you had sort of taken yourself out of it a bit, and that this experience actually helped you to really to step in a different way, is what I heard you say. And I am curious, and you mentioned earlier as well, something I see, I'm sure you see this, maybe you've experienced it, is we do live, at least I perceive what is thought of as a hustle culture, right? The pushing. And I hear this all the time, like, when do I actually have time to cry? Like, tell me where and when, like, and not only that, but I think for many of us, especially female and female entrepreneurs and women identified entrepreneurs, those that are kind of in their heart space and wanting to create in the world, this leaning on giving yourself space and grace and time, and leaning more into more of maybe what you call that feminine energy, it's a different way of being than just pushing through, than just diverting around the boulder. We don't want to even go there. We'll just go to the manifestation book. Like, there's something about what you're teaching and saying, Kris, that what I'm getting is this is a new way of being with yourself. This calls upon a different way of looking at time, of how you are doing your do, like just all of it. And maybe you can talk about that for a moment.
Oh, I love this question and also your insights, because I think many of us are potentially building lives around what we think we should have, or maybe comparing ourselves to other people and saying, I got to keep up, or I'm not successful unless I have what they have, whether we're conscious of it or not, especially as entrepreneurs and business owners. And when I realized that I hadn't life-proofed my business, and I didn't come up with that. I remember seeing somebody talk about it on Instagram. I was like, and I don't remember who, so I apologize, but I remember thinking, damn, that's exactly what I didn't do. Unless I'm doing it, we're not generating what we need to be generating. And I had to take that big step back and really wrestle with my ego and come up with a different version of success for me, and almost put blinders on, and not look around, and just be connected to my heart and what feels good. And the more I did that, it didn't instantly turn around. It wasn't like, whoa, it's raining. It's raining cash. Nope. It's been a slow and steady rebuild of my brand in a lot of ways, but one that I feel so much more aligned to and in service of, but also connected to and willing to go the distance with. Of like, yes, I enjoy this enough that I can consider doing this for a lot more years, where there was a time before this big rupture, I wasn't so sure. I wasn't so sure. As much as I love my community and I love what I do, I was exhausted, and I was feeling like is there more to life than work?
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't know how to get off that treadmill. And then the treadmill broke. And I was like, okay, well, that's one way to get off. Now what are you going to do, girl?
No more treadmills.
No more treadmills, It's like, do I go work for somebody? I have no skills. My husband always laughs. You couldn't work for somebody. You can't have a boss. I'm like, it's true. I have no skills. I have to make this work. I have different types of skills, but it's like that classic idea that the universe will tap you, and then it'll shake you up a little bit, and then it'll push you, and then it'll knock you out. And I have had those knockout punches so many times, and each time they happen, I am a little more resilient, and I am maybe laughing a little bit after a lot of tears, and I am saying, okay, well, look, there are certain themes that I keep orbiting around. And each time I orbit, I reach a new layer of growth. And isn't that what healing looks like?
Mm. I really hope you write this next book on being stress hardy. Side note, because I think it's fantastic and it's very ringy and I think that's what we're getting at here is that resilience and getting the tap on the universe before the knockout. Although sometimes that knockout is, I know for me as well, I was like, wow, okay, we're going to redo everything in my life. Everything is upside down. But I'm hearing from you, Kris, that, and this is what I've always felt from you. And I think this is inspiring. And just for anybody listening, first of all, we'll have all your information to check you out and to be a part of your community. I would just say, do anything Kris is doing. Go join anything Kris is doing. She is awesome. You're real. And you're, that courage, bravery, sometimes that fear, I'm sure, the whole fear standing for false evidence appearing real, but it can really seem real. It can feel scary to pause, to stop the business, I know for me, I changed my whole day. I do not even start until afternoon because I need time to do morning practice and movement and take care of myself. This is like radical. It's
That
not.
is radical. That
Yeah.
is so inspiring. I just want to pause you for a minute because I remember years ago when I would hear somebody like you say that, I would be like, are you an alien from another planet? And how do I get on that planet? Like it did not compute because I wasn't willing to make certain changes. It's like there's a lot that you have to say no to and prune out of your life or pause in your life that you will feel very uncomfortable pruning and pausing and saying no to. It is not an easy path that you just described. It sounds great, but when you're on the other outside of it, what you don't realize is all of the discomfort that's going to come up to try to get to where you are right now. And that is what's, I think, the truly inspirational path that I think each and every one of us are called to explore in our own way. It might not mean that you can have the same work schedule, but it's the same philosophy of like, the life that you want requires you to say no to a lot of things that you don't want, but that you're really uncomfortable letting go of because maybe you don't want to disappoint people. Maybe you're afraid to let go of certain, patterns. Maybe there's certain addictions at play that need care. For me, workaholism is an addiction, right? And so it's spiritual work. Even in the one nugget you just shared shows me so much spiritual work that you are exploring.
Thank you. We have got to do a round two because right now
Love to.
I'm like, what just happened to the time? I mean, you just said about 17 things and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to go there. We got to go there. I'm just saying this real time, my friends, like literally, Kris, I'm like, oh, we need to do round two. I'm going to take notes if you're open because now now I'm like, oh, now I'm seeing some other things. We got my curious mind, your curious mind. We have this beautiful, I believe we have our mutual friend, Michelle, and I want to put a shout out. She helped me to come up with the You-est, that whole idea, which is so what
good.
we are talking about, which is also really, and this whole topic of saying no, it's why I'm like, we could just do a whole thing on that and the workaholism. You're coming back. We're going to do it because I need to have that conversation. But it's like, and it's different for each of us finding that balance. Thank you though. I just, your decision to be uncomfortable and to be curious, like all of these ingredients. And I think of you with all your cookbooks and beautiful, just you have so much beautiful work out there that's all about healing and wholeness and holistic, like that integrative, we're a whole person. It's not just the food you're eating, it's everything, the thoughts, the way you're using your time, being with all emotions, the ingredients. I'm picturing you with like the kale is got it. Sometimes it doesn't taste so great or feel so great. It's, the onion, it's going to make you cry. I don't know if you've ever done this, but you could take each like vegetable. It's like the courage, the beet, it's like the beating
Yeah,
heart.
yeah.
Anyhow, I'll stop with the
I love that.
ingredients. But I just honor you, acknowledge you, because you're being able to teach it and talk about it and support others in this. This to me is what's very needed and called for healing now, with a lot of stress and anxiety and a lot of people that are feeling very, very, even out of their body and out of touch with emotions and out of that wholeness. And I just appreciate your different ways of looking at it. My quick question before we wrap is, I call them heart flares, Kris. Like your
Mm.
heart, maybe I didn't ask you something, or there's a quote or a message or something that your heart's like, hold on, wait, I gotta say this. So I always like to leave like a little space at the end for a heart flare.
Yeah. So I have been ending most of these incredible interviews that I've had the privilege of doing with people like you, with a bit of fatherly advice that my dad passed on to me before he passed. And I think in this time of my life, it is the compass that I attune to. It is so many of us wait to live our golden years. Like once the kids are out of the house, the project's over, this is behind me, then I'll do XYZ, PDQ. And the golden years aren't promised. And instead of putting off the You-est you until some magical time when you have your shit together, or you have more time, and you've retired or so forth and so on, what can you do to make golden moments now? Golden moments woven throughout each and every day, simple pleasures, simple things that connect you to yourself, that allow you to start to feel that relationship and joy of your own company. Simple moments that are golden, that are woven together and strung together, that make up a magnificent life. Because it's not about the big highs and the spikes and the promises of the future. It is about that golden moment that you can take right now in this moment that matters the most. And we don't have time to put it off.
Mm. Ooh, and so it is. Amen. Aho. I'm like, whatever else you want to say to just anchor that. That is gorgeous. I just need to take a minute. That was so powerful. I feel it. And I know for all of our soul brothers and sisters out there, really truly taking what Kris just said about this golden moment now, right now. Don't put it off. It's here. It's now. Nothing is guaranteed. And oh my God, that is so beautiful. Thank you. And to your father for passing that on. Yeah. My gosh, you are just, I'm so grateful. You're so special. This was delicious. And we've got to do round two, Kris, because there's just so many more questions.
Let's
And
do it,
thoughts.
Julie. I so appreciate you. Thank you for having me on your beautiful show.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll just say thank you to all of our soul family for being here. I know this is going to uplift and really have you connect into your heart and just being brave and willing to allow yourself to experience the whole myriad, the whole spectrum of emotions, and definitely get I'm Not a Morning Person, and anything that Kris Carr is doing. We'll have that all in the notes. Thank you and blessings and love to you, Kris. My friend, I'm so grateful and honored to be here with you on your journey and being your You-est you. Thank you for watching this episode, for being part of this incredible community and this mission to really step into your light, to your highest purpose. I believe that as we all do that, we all can really be our best selves and uplift consciousness and in humanity. So thank you. I also wanted to say that if you are looking for greater support right now, maybe you're having a health concern or you're looking to really step into that next version, best version of yourself, please come connect with me, whether it's for more resources or coaching or guidance. I would love to support you in any way that I can. Just go to juliereisler.com. You can book a powerful one-on-one breakthrough session there. You can connect with me. I would love to meet you. I'd love to hear how I can be on this journey with you. And before I forget, if you'd like a little more of this good vibe tribe and would like to digest these episodes with a high vibe community, just go to Facebook and look up the You-est You podcast community. You'll find us there. Love always. And thank you so much for taking the time and energy to truly stepping into your authenticity and being your You-est You.